So what is this thing, people are wondering? Well, it has a backside. Now, why would I have this? And what does it do for me?
Hey folks, I'm Josh. Dan is here. This is Show Me Your Setup, episode 15, Sound Absorbin.
Sound Absorbin.
Show me your setup.
My setup involves one of these today. It's so big, you can't see it all at once unless I move really far away, and even then, it's almost impossible to see the whole thing. So what is this thing, people are wondering? Well, it has a backside. We'll show you that too. This is a sound absorber. This is one of several that I'm going to make for my living space. What it's going to do for me is absorb some sounds.
I listen to so many podcasts. I watch a lot of TV. I listen to a lot of radio. And people that are interviewed so often sound like they're in a large, cavernous, open floor plan with no sound absorbing material. No curtains. No clothes. A large marble room.
Glass windows.
And if the
painted walls, hard ceilings.
If the content's good enough, I'm willing to hang in there and suffer through it. Often on podcasts, sound quality is really bad. You can solve half of that by at least having your host sounding good. So as Dan and I are hosts, we want to do our best to sound good in the episode. One way to do it is with sound absorbing material. Folks so often want to get into this. They see sound absorption material in YouTube videos. And the stuff looks expensive. Is it expensive?
A lot of the stuff you see in those videos is expensive. Products by companies like Oralex. You might spend a couple $100s on just a box of foam. So yes, there are many applications in which a sound absorbing panel are going to be very helpful for you. Maybe you have a large room with hard surfaces and sounds just echo around. Maybe you live in an open concept space with other people and you don't want to hear all of their sounds from 2 rooms away as if they're right next to you. Maybe you're setting up a home theater and you want to absorb all those frequencies that interfere with you having that perfect surround sound system. Maybe you just want to have a little peace and quiet when you're in bed and all the sounds from outside or the rest of the house are bleeding in. So if you put enough sound absorbing panels in the right places, those reflected sounds, rather than bouncing around up a stairwell and around the corner, are going to get absorbed by the panel. When I yell at it, it gets absorbed.
Yeah. Can I take a side quest here?
Side quest.
My son's a student athlete, a basketball player, and I'm at a lot of different gyms. And there are some gyms where, surprisingly, you can hear the coach or the trainer incredibly well. And I looked around, and I see that the gym has a wood floor, and I see that from the ground to about halfway up the walls, have fabric wrapping around the walls. And I'm like, wow, okay, this gym is treated for sound and it's a pleasure to be here and the kids can hear the coaches. Even with all the dribbling and with all the yelling, it's clear. And in some other gyms where...
Have you looked at the ceilings in those gyms as well?
I think this one had just the old style. What are the push-up?
The drop ceiling?
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, those panels, they vary in thickness. Yeah. Sometimes, in certain environments, they're very thin. It's often fiberboard, I think. But sometimes they're much thicker with a layer of the fiberboard or soundboard plus fiberglass insulation on top. And those panels will absorb all the sounds that are going up or the sounds being created above in the metal roof or whatever's above that so it doesn't come back down. But essentially, you bounce that basketball on the floor, on the court, and the sound is reverberating. It's going to hit the walls, it's going to hit the ceiling. But if it's being absorbed on the walls and the ceiling, then it's not coming back down to the floor, and there is why you can hear that coach.
And then the other gyms where it's cement walls.
Metal ceiling.
Metal ceilings, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a cacophony of squeaks and thumps and thuds and what?
High ceilings, a lot of bouncing. That sounds bouncing everywhere. And it's almost impossible to hear what the coach is saying.
The decay time of the echoes and the reverberations is much longer in an environment like that.
And some television interviews, some radio interviews, some podcast interviews, it literally sounds like folks are being interviewed from inside one of those gyms. And I don't know why, but we bear it and we deal with it and we listen because it's compelling content. But whatever you can do, especially as a host, to treat your room so that you sound great every episode, it's really important. You can interview someone who doesn't sound great. That's okay. Every once in a while, it's absolutely fine. But we do what we can to treat our spaces. And a lot of folks that are starting out with podcasting are super interested in getting great sound and treating their spaces.
And if you're one of those folks and you don't want to spend a lot of money on commercially made products for sound absorbing, perhaps you'll be interested in this version I've made in almost entirely out of scraps that I had on hand. Of course, you don't need to use scraps. You can go to the lumber yard, the hardware store, wherever it is that you buy wood, insulation, staples, etc. And you can get the materials you need to make your own sound absorber like this one.
First, would you tell people ideally where they would place sound absorption panels?
You know, Josh, that's a very complicated discussion to get into because every situation is going to be different.
Yeah.
I mean, are we talking about a living room, a bedroom, a hallway, a bathroom, a kitchen, a basketball court, a church? Each of these applications is going to require a different solution. In fact, every shape of room, every method of construction, be it drywall or wood paneling or glass or, it depends on so many variables. It's kind of hard to get into where people should put the sound absorbers unless we have a specific situation.
In the videos that I watch on YouTube, the really well-produced ones, I generally see them on camera. So they're at least behind the host. I know that.
And the irony there is we're not really worried about the sound behind us because our voice is going this way. So if anything, I'd want the sound absorbers in front of me to capture my voice so it doesn't kind of bounce back and create an echo in the room.
Okay.
Your mileage will vary. If it were me and I had several of these panels and I wanted to create a very, very cozy environment, I'd have one flanking either side of the monitor, maybe one overhead, one above.
Wow.
I don't know if I'd put any behind me at all until I'd walk around the room clapping to see how it sounds.
Yeah. Well, what materials did you use for this one? Because I know you, and this is not a flimsy panel, right? This is going to hold up.
Exactly. Because I watched a bunch of different videos on YouTube to decide what's the best way for me to make a lot of panels without spending a whole lot of money. And I found one that was really compelling to me because he made very lightweight panels out of very thin materials, but they're very strong and they serve exactly the purpose. So I said, this is the one I'm going to model it after. Doesn't take a lot of wood, doesn't take a lot of materials, not very expensive to make. So there's something called a furring strip, which is typically a 1x2 piece of wood. And those are sold in various lengths. Oftentimes you can get an 8-foot furring strip. And I didn't have any furring strips on hand. I had an old 2x4 that was longer than 47 inches. So I have a table saw. I ripped it down into several strips for myself and was able to cut them to the appropriate lengths. I think this breaks it down a little more simply.
Yeah.
So this is a comprehensive look of all the stuff I used to make one panel, minus the fabric, the blue and white fabric that wasn't in this shot. But what is in this shot is a staple gun, staples, a cordless drill, some screws, some eye bolts, a pair of scissors, a utility knife, landscaping fabric, which will hold the insulation on the backside, the insulation itself, which is a wonderful product we'll talk about a little bit later. And then this is all scrap wood that I had at home. Again, I had the 2x4 that I ripped into strips to make thinner pieces that are essentially 1.5 by 3/4 of an inch. And these are the shorter for the horizontal parts. I mean, I guess you could call them the verticals if you were going to hang the whole thing sideways, but this is intended to be a vertical panel. So the longer parts are on the sides, and that helps support the weight of the entire thing because the screws are going to go through the edges of the long and into the short. So in this corner, there will be a screw. In this corner, there will be a screw. About a foot down, there will be eye bolts. And again, I'm not going to show you how I built the entire thing because I'm going to link the video so everyone can go and see the original creator of this. And he explains everything in great detail. He gives other options. He talks about different types of insulation, why you might choose one over the other. If you're not comfortable working with materials that are somewhat hazardous, then you might want to avoid mineral wool, which is what I've used, or fiberglass insulation, because some people find that that's a very skin irritant. This doesn't irritate me. I still wear long sleeves and gloves when I'm working with it, and a mask, because you don't want to breathe in the particles that come from this. And so for these reasons, maybe you want to work with a different kind of insulation. They make insulation out of denim that's very safe. But to each their own. I also saw a video where a woman tested the various insulations for their acoustic absorbing properties, and much to my chagrin, I found out that the pink stuff actually absorbs better than either the mineral wool or the denim. Yeah. But I like working with the mineral wool. So that's my choice, and everyone should make their own choice as to what insulation they want to use in their sound absorbers. Back to the build. So, I had some other thin wood that I cut down to size, and then I assembled it by screwing the boards together and Actually, I used a nail gun. Sorry, I brought in a new tool. I was going to use a staple gun, but I decided, you know what, it's going to be fast and easy with a nail gun. I have one, so I nailed the thin boards into the 1x2s. And that's what it looks like in a corner. And there's another. And then I used some Gorilla Tape because you want to soften those edges. It doesn't have to be super strong. You just don't want to tear the fabric on them later because we're going to encase this entire thing in fabric. Then I took landscaping fabric, which is something that you can buy at the hardware store or the home and garden center. And it's just a very inexpensive material that will serve the purpose of keeping the insulation in. Very eloquent, Dan. Way to talk. Again, this is the insulation in the background. It's Owens Corning, Thermafiber, Fire and Sound Guard Plus. There would be a link because I used the product and it's fine. It works.
Should we talk about your total cost, at least for the items that you bought?
Well, that's where it gets really interesting because the only thing I bought for this project was the 8 bats of insulation. This is the R13, 3.5-inch thick, 15-inch wide, 47-inch long, because that's designed to fit into the cavity that you'd normally have with your 16-inch on-center spacing of when somebody frames a wall.
Okay. Oh.
A 2x4 wall. So that's why the bats are this size. Yes?
How many panels would you estimate that this bag could serve?
8, if they are all the full size.
Okay.
Because there are 8 bats in there.
Could I have a ballpark on how much you paid for this bag?
About $55.
Oh, very inexpensive for one panel then.
Yes. However, if you don't happen to have wood, screws, staples, landscaping fabric, and regular fabric on hand, plus there is one more thing I'm going to have to buy. I've yet to buy. There's one more thing. That would be a very important element before I hang this up and put it into use, is that it needs to be safe. And the one thing that it isn't really fully safe on yet is fire, because a lot of fabrics are flammable. You can buy special acoustic fabric that's already been treated so that it's less likely to burn. You can also add a spray after the fact to most every fabric, and that's what I'm going to be doing with this one.
Oh, speaking of
fabrics, yes.
Just another side quest. My son has his basketball jerseys up on hangers on his walls. I'm wondering if a super, super cheap, less effective sound absorption would be to hang some clothes on your walls. It would help a bit.
It would absolutely help. You can hang a blanket on the wall.
Yeah.
Towels. I've found a lot of videos online where people make acoustic sound absorbers like this, and instead of buying insulation, they just use a pile of old towels, terry cloth towels, stapled in between fabric. Basically, one way to look at it is take anything and see if you can pass air through it. So blow through it. If you can feel any air come through, you know sound will go through it. So that's step one, because if no air will go in, then it's going to reflect, and that's not the goal. The next thing is put a bunch of layers up and, put it between you and the microphone. Here's me talking into the microphone. Here's me talking through my sweatshirt into the microphone. Doesn't change it a whole lot. Now, here's me talking through the sound absorber into the microphone. I'm going to speak at the same volume now, and when I move it aside, and when I put it back here, and when I move it aside. I don't know, Josh, did it sound any different?
Yes.
All right. So there we have it. Yes, simple, quick, and easy solution for anybody who's trying to treat their space on a budget is put up sweaters, blankets, jerseys, whatever you have, all around the space where sound is reflecting. So then I put a bat of insulation in this little cavity that I'd made because, again, I had stapled the landscaping fabric to the bottom there. And this leaves a little cavity in the back, which is good because you want a slight air gap between the sound absorber and the wall. There's a calculation one can do to figure out what the optimal air gap is.
Wow.
Because as you move the absorber further away from the wall, it increases its effectiveness on certain frequencies, but it also decreases its effectiveness on other frequencies. And so it's a balancing act. Basically, this creates a 3/4 inch gap on the back automatically, so I can hang it flat on the wall. There is a little bit of an air gap, so it's really good at absorbing the frequencies of the human voice. So then I stuffed the insulation in there. You can see from behind. Of course, I also held it up, so you saw it then. Yes, well, you got to iron the fabric. You don't want to have wrinkles. So you take a moment, you break out the ironing board, you heat up the iron, you iron that fabric nice and quick, and then it's ready to install.
Wow.
And so I've draped it over the box. It fits. Flip the whole thing over, staple it all up. Bada bing, bada boom. It's all done. Do I love the corners? No. I'll show you why. There, you can see the fold. I didn't do an elegant job with it. But the neat thing is, as pointed out in the video that we're referencing, this is stapled in. I can just take out a few staples and retweak it if I feel like it. But if I find where I hang it, I'm not going to see that. Why would I take the time? And so, yes, because I have this one panel and I have 7 more bats, I can make 7 more panels this size, or I can make even more if I make any of them half size.
Did you complete this panel in one day?
I believe I completed this panel in less than 2 hours. And that includes milling all the lumber, which if one is buying dimensional lumber to the right size would take no time at all because you don't have to actually mill it first.
Okay.
You just be cutting the ends. When I go back to make another, I'm going to make the rest. So I'm going to do it all in one process. And I estimate it'll take maybe 5 hours to make 7 more panels.
Okay. Pros and cons of doing it yourself versus buying panels. Have you ever purchased acoustic panels before?
I have purchased the acoustic, the foam that one puts on.
Yes.
You know, the various acoustic tiles from like Oralex, bass traps, and regular absorbing panels. But now these are thin little things that are designed mostly for high frequencies. Those little, I don't have any on hand, but you've seen them before. Like in a previous episode, when we did the recording box, I had Oralex panels in that one. So if you refer back to that, you'll see the Oralex panels. You'll see how they can be effective for speech in a small space. But with a bigger absorber, you're going to be able to absorb larger sounds as well. Now, not necessarily all the bass in a car thumping by or whatever else, but we're talking about sounds within your living space where you're just trying to make a more pleasant atmosphere. Or in the case of recording your podcast, you just want to make sure that your voice is getting picked up in the microphone one time and not several times. You don't want to be in that big echoing, reverberating chamber that Josh was talking about at the beginning of the episode where you hear people and you're like, that's okay for the guest, because they're just here now and we can't control it. But the host really should sound like they're close and confined with their microphone.
Yes. What would you say to people who are thinking about building their own or going online to buy one or several or a handful, a dozen?
Oh, sure. Because this all kind of started with you asking me, have I looked into buying a commercially made version as opposed to building my own? And the reason that I chose to build my own is A, I have the tools. B, I have the materials. All I had to do was buy one bag of insulation, 1 bushel, 1 hug full. It's a hug of insulation. It's very soft. You can take a nap on it. It's very cozy and warm. But no, all I had to do was buy one of those, and I knew that with my $55 nominal investment, I would be able to make 8 acoustic panels because, again, I have all these wood scraps and whatnot lying around. Not everyone has that. I've found through my research that there's a compelling argument that says it pretty much costs the same in terms of labor time and materials to either build your own or buy them commercially made. You don't really save any money because of your time. Depends on what your time is worth, is what I'm saying. But I saw one recently where a panel about this size was, say, $82 when they made it. out of buying all the materials. But again, they didn't have the materials, so they had to buy all the materials to make it. And a similar commercially available version was about $89. So was their time in acquiring materials and making them worth the $8 difference? That's for everyone to decide for themselves. Mm-hmm. Now, when you go with a commercially available product, you don't necessarily have as wide a range of color choices, or maybe you do. Maybe you have even more because they source a lot of fabrics. I don't know. For me, because I had the tools and I had the materials, this was the least costly method.
We should talk about ModPod, the company we work for, and the fact that both of us work in the production department, and we have customers that are looking to improve their spaces and sound better. And one of our roles is to help answer people's questions about that.
So in working with some of our customers, they've been in terrible acoustic environments. We're talking about a small rectangular room, desk, windows, walls. They have a door, fortunately, but there's nothing soft in that room, save for maybe a padded carpet on the floor. Everything about that room sounded bad. We said, what can we do to improve this space? We encouraged them to put carpeting down or another rug on top of that. Put some soft things behind your entire setup. Now, this was, in one case, a video podcast customer. And so we didn't want to mess up the visual look behind. So we said, okay, we're going to put some sound absorbing elements in front of, well, behind the camera or in front of you. And that way your voice won't be bouncing back and forth in the room. If they had the time and the means to make panels or to buy panels, they could treat the entire room so that it sounded good all the time.
Yeah, so I think this video will be beneficial to people that are looking for ideas to treat their room. And this is just one idea, building sound absorption panels or buying them.
Of course, we also encourage people to consider the room choice. And part of the Studio Prep service, we say, look at all the spaces you have available to you. Now, which one is the quietest naturally? This is an office setting, a home, it doesn't really matter. Are there appliances nearby? Do you have a furnace running? Is there an HVAC unit right outside the window? Are these noises going to get picked up by your microphone? What kind of microphone are you using? All things to consider. You know, we talked about how it can be loud in a gym or it can be less loud in a gym, depending on how they've treated the surface around. Another space I find that can be kind of loud all the time is the pool. Now, if you'll think back to the episode, Swimmin' with Mojawa, is that what we called it?
Swimmin' with Mojawa Run Plus Bone Conduction Waterproof Sports Headphones, episode 10 of Show Me Your Setup.
So yes, back in episode 10, Josh and I both had some footage when we were in a pool, and it's a very loud environment. But what's neat about that episode is we got some feedback. Josh, why don't you share?
Someone replied to our audiogram, which is a short version, kind of a teaser, a video to catch your attention, which we produce at ModPod, by the way, for folks that are looking to start a podcast for business. Well,
as a matter of fact, this comment was on an audiogram.
Yes. The commenter is at 225RIP, and he asks, will the Run Plus do voice assistance? If so, how? And yes, the Mojawa Run Plus headphones have voice assistance. In the Bluetooth mode, double-click the touchpad to activate the phone voice assistant. That voice assistant will be determined by whatever phone you have. If you have an iPhone, it will be Siri. If you have Google, it will be Google.
I suppose so. Okay, Google.
And on the same audiogram, we got another comment. A user whose name I won't read because it's just long and more random. He's probably a user without uploaded videos. He's just there to comment. I'm a marathon swimmer, and this gives a whole new dimension to my long training days. This headset works amazing underwater. The clarity is incredible. Using the earplugs included also improves the quality of the sound. And yeah, Dan,
I 100% agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, the earplugs make it very immersive. You don't have to be swimming in order to wear the bone conduction headphones and use earplugs either. Rather than having a sound absorber, if you just want to get into your podcast and tune out the family, you put on some bone conduction headphones and then you put in your earplugs. Now you've reduced the outside sounds by, say, 30 decibels. You're not hearing anything in the room except the glorious podcast that you're listening to. In fact, you could listen to our podcast. All you have to do is bop on over to gomodpod.com/show-me-your-setup. That's show-me-your-setup. But you don't have to go there. You can just go to gomodpod.com and click in the menu system for podcasts. You'll see Show Me Your Setup, and that'll give you a bunch of different ways to access our feed, including, the RSS feed, Spotify, Libsyn, I don't know, all these things. Josh, you take it from here.
Back to the headphones and the pool and the earplugs. There are many reasons why you want bone conducting headphones. And often one of those reasons is so you can hear the ambient sounds around you along with whatever you're listening to through your headphones. But in the pool is not one of those areas where that's going to be effective. So you want your earplugs in, catch all the lovely music from your bone.
So what I like about the earplugs is I haven't had water in my ears in the last 2 years. Since I started swimming with bone conduction headphones, I always use my earplugs for the better audio clarity. And I found that now I don't get water in my ears. Sometimes when swimming, flipping underwater, get a little water in there and you're walking around like for the next couple of days just trying to shake that water out. Haven't had that problem. Now I just broke my neck. Here we go. Going to the hospital, Josh.
Yeah, I know what it's like.
I'm on my gurney.
So here I am in the sound absorber. I'm pretending it's a gurney, and it's taking me to the hospital. It's very soothing in the sound absorber. I think what I'm going to do in my setup is have several of these around the desk where nobody can see them, but the effects will be obvious in the future.
Getting back to the feedback, we love those YouTube comments. So go to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/@GoModPod. All of the Show Me Your Setup episodes are there. I really appreciate you building this sound absorption panel and sharing it with everyone. I appreciate you showing us your setup. And
That's
I want to invite our listeners, show me your setup. If our podcasts and our YouTube channel inspires you and you have a cool space that you enjoy being in and you like working in and you like being creative in, show me your setup. Email us at showmeyoursetuppodcast@gmail.com. So whatever way you feel comfortable reaching out to us, if it's on Facebook, facebook.com/GoModPod. If it's Twitter, X, it's @GoModPod. If you want to go to our website and fill out a form, gomodpod.com.
Again, you're going to go to gomodpod.com. Under podcasts, you're going to click on the Show Me Your Setup page. There's going to be an intro paragraph. It says, if you have a setup you'd like to share, and right there, that's a hyperlink. You click on that, it brings you to a form. You can give us your name, send us some images.
Tell us why you want to show me your setup.
And we'll get in touch. There's a channel called In the Mix. That would be youtube.com/@inthemix. And this guy, Michael Wynn, is an audio engineer based in Scotland, and his video, which is linked wherever we link things, was very informative. Thanks. And I didn't dare make a video of how to make one of these panels because your video is so comprehensive, there was no point. Once again, we're Show Me Your Setup. I'm Dan.
I'm Josh.
And we thank you for listening to our show.
We thank you for listening. Thanks for tuning in, everybody.
Now, let's see. If I yell with it behind me, thanks, it doesn't do anything.
It might. It might.
We'll test it out. I'll have some panels in the future. We'll hang them here and there and everywhere. We're going to try some different things.
Are we all set?
Episode 15. That's a wrap. Sound Absorbin with homemade stuff. It's fun. You should try it. Hey, and if you make a panel and want to share it with us, please feel free.
Show us that picture. Show me your setup, your sound absorption, homemade DIY panel. I want to see it. Show me your setup.